Have you ever wondered why the same problems keep showing up in your life? Why you attract the same kind of relationships, struggles with the same fears, or react so strongly to certain people? What if I told you that these patterns aren't random, but clues pointing to the hidden parts of yourself? These parts you've been taught to ignore. This is the realm of shadow work, the deep inner journey of facing and integrating the aspects of yourself that shape your reality. In this episode, we're diving in how to recognize these patterns, what they reveal about your unconscious mind, and how you can start working with them to transform your life. My name is Michael Berry, and I'm here with my mentor and teacher, Justin, and this is the new Ashla Podcast. So, a disclaimer for this episode. We are not therapists. We are providing this information for educational and entertainment purposes. You should consult a professional before starting this work because it can lead down a dark road if you don't know what you're doing.
Even simple things like meditation. I've learned that over the years. When I first started down this path, those disclaimers weren't prevalent. And some people would do meditation, like avoid meditation, or even Zazen would stress them out. Or in cases where people have severe PTSD for something, those void meditations, or even, like I said, even Zazen would send them into a frenzy. And it was just like, no one really thought about it. Nowadays, I'm going to find some resources and I'll probably put it in the show description when this show airs. There was a really good resource that our friend Allie had shared with me. It was something when we wrote the meditation book 4 or 5 years ago now. 3 or 4 years ago, we actually rated each meditation on a level of 1 through 5 on, if this meditation could be dangerous for people with this. We kind of integrated that into that book, and it was very insightful. But she had shared with me years ago when I wrote the book some resources, and I'll put those, if it's something that people can get on the internet, then we'll put it in the show description. And also, all of these shows, it should be implied. But like with shows like this, we really got to kind of remind you, but it should be implied that if you're under the care of a professional, always get their advice before taking any of ours. Because as Michael said, this is based on our personal experiences with shadow work. So, and
Yeah.
things that we've done to help others through it. So I appreciate that you putting that in there.
Yeah, I think it's just so important. I mean, there's just so much depth to it, and we're no experts in this field. We have, like Justin said, we have our own experiences, our own understandings, and we feel like we're effective at expressing our understandings, but by no means take our words as gospel. There are certain practitioners out there that specialize in this stuff that can truly help you really work on this. And I can definitely say it is so imperative that you do not do this alone. When I started shadow work, I was going through my dark night of the soul and I was in a dark place. And kind of like Justin was saying with meditating, I would go into meditations and try to do this shadow work. And I mean, shadow work, part of what it does is it breaks apart this safety net you've built for yourself through your life. And when you're going through hardship and you don't have that safety net, you can find yourself in some really dark and heavy places that you may not know how to navigate. More often than not, you probably won't. And so it's always
Yeah.
important to have a guide.
Well, and I guided you through parts of it.
Yeah, it was when I reached out to you is when it started getting to be overwhelming, and it was like,
Right.
maybe he knows some stuff about this, and sure as
But
hell
it
you did.
works. But the reason we say, if you're under the care of somebody for this kind of work, they may not call it shadow work. They probably should, because that's, as we get into the show, kind of the grandfather or father of psychiatry, really. We were talking about him. No matter what they call it, if you've been diagnosed with something and they have you working a plan, you really need to stick to that. It doesn't mean that the stuff we tell you is useless. They may say, wow, that might work for you. Go ahead and try it. But always consult with them first, because there's one key thing here. The things we share do work or have worked, but nobody knows you better than the people you're working with. I don't know you. I love you, but I don't know you. I know Michael, and I've known Michael for many years, which is why I was able to help him through this without any problems.
And even then, you gave me a disclaimer when you really started diving into it with me.
Yeah, it's going to get scary and it's going to get hard. And as we go on through the show today, shadow work it's not great until you're done, until you're through it. And I don't know if we'll ever be done with it because we must revisit it every so often. Because really, it's where you're talking about the unconscious aspect of not only part of who you are, but it's the things that you actively, well, not maybe not actively, because we're talking about unconscious stuff here too, but the things that are hidden from you and that you deny yourself or that you suppress or reject. So it gets really, really murky and muddy for most of it.
Well, and one of the key phrases in the healing community is it always gets worse before it gets better. And this is kind of what they're talking about. And kind of to touch on what Justin was saying earlier is we offer you a perspective, an approach to look at this journey through our lens, what's helped us. But there are 100 avenues in this journey and how to approach this work. So we may have answers, but it doesn't mean our approach is the best approach for you. So do be mindful.
And as I tell everyone, I did a show a long time ago called The Masters of Bull You Know What. This is the person that has all the answers and is the only person on earth that could get you through this or teach you anything. All you have to do is bend the knee and swear undying allegiance and loyalty forever and ever. We don't have all the answers for you. Hell, I'm still looking for answers for myself sometimes. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. We're not trying to hurt you, but we also want you to explore all of your options.
To grow and become the best version of yourself. And that's what a lot of this work is for. It doesn't mean being perfect by any measure, but
Right.
being whole is truly the big agenda of this journey. It's finding
And
wholeness within yourself.
if we're not the ones to help you grow another inch, then we're okay with that because there will be someone or a group that will be able to help you do it. We just weren't the right fit. So, and we're okay with that because we really want you to explore.
So, with that being said, well, how would you define shadow work, Justin?
Shadow work, like I kind of alluded to, is something that everybody has, especially according to Jung. He believed everybody had a shadow self. But a lot of people just think of shadow work as a negative thing. You know, it's your angry side or your envious side, or resentful side, or your selfish side, or whatever. But it also has positive potentials. Things like creativity, assertiveness, courage.
Self advocacy is what I was going to say.
Right, right. And these are things, and we've talked about, ironically enough, the whole domestication of human beings. These things kind of creep. We kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Collect these things, both good and bad, due to whatever conditioning we've had. And really, a lot of it is fear of judgment. So here comes fear again. But it's really that unconscious aspect of our personality that contains those hidden parts that we either consciously or unconsciously deny, suppress, reject, hide from everyone, and even try to hide it from ourselves. That's kind of how I would define shadow.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this beautiful analogy a while back, and it's like anytime we go through something traumatic, stressful, helpless, our psyche splits. And the part that gets shoved into the unconscious is the part that would not have protected you in that moment. And then the part that moves to the front is the conditioning that teaches you to be safe. So an example for me was as a kid, I had a sister who got away with a lot of stuff, and anytime she was confronted, I would be accused of whatever to help her avoid blame. So I learned it wasn't safe to advocate. So people pleasing became my method. I learned self advocacy wasn't safe. Anger wasn't safe. And so I shoved those emotions into my unconscious and deemed those emotions as bad because they wouldn't allow me to be safe in those moments. But that carried into my teenage years, my adult years, and it wasn't until I started this path have I started to try to reintegrate these parts. But when we have these things in the shadow, usually you have something that's pushed further into the light, some kind of stronger set of emotions. So for some it might be your anger is how you have resolution, and so therefore being understanding and empathetic is not a safe emotion in times of conflict because that makes you vulnerable. The inverse of what I have.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a splitting in the psyche when we go through events because you can say you don't have trauma. There's big T trauma and little T trauma, and trauma's never how crazy what we went through was, but what happens inside of us when we go through something. And you could have something as simple as stubbing your toe and being afraid to taking corner sharp because you stubbed your toe. Trauma is little T trauma can still impact your personality and split your psyche.
Yeah. Right. And but it comes, this show pairs very well, almost like a steak and red wine, right? This show pairs very well with the dance between the ego and the soul. And
Yeah.
you're gonna kind of touch on some. We're gonna be really focusing on the ego, closer to the ego part of this. But yeah, it does that because it's trying to protect us. I mean, that's why it kind of splits us off and helps us not see things and really hides things from us. And that's why this is really mostly an unconscious thing. Your shadow operates mostly there, unconsciously. But make no mistake, it influences our behaviors, it influences our reactions, our relationships, and
Our thought processes.
even really important things like life decisions. And mostly we don't actually realize it's happening until we start doing the shadow work.
Yeah. Well said. So you kind of touched on the origin of shadow work. So Carl Jung, one of the fathers of psychology, was initially influenced by Sigmund Freud.
Freud.
Yeah.
I don't like him very much. He's kind of a dark sider. I
Yeah.
like
But
Young.
a lot of his ideas did open gateways to
I know.
looking at things.
This is why we must harmonize with the dark side. Speaking of that, there is a quote by old Carl there that really helps us apply many of the axioms that we do, because we are servants. We are servants of our fellow man, servants of the light. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. It's a very powerful statement.
And that's one thing that I can definitely say about this work is the more you begin to understand yourself, the more you begin to understand others. And I don't mean that through judgment. I don't mean that through high and mighty perspective, but the more you can empathize because you begin to understand the hidden cogs in the clock that is a human. And there's just so much depth that drives people, even the worst of people. You understand that more at 9 out of 10, especially with the most tyrannical of people, there's a scared child hiding inside them.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean forgiving and letting them do their thing. No, you stand up to those kind of people, but you begin to understand what it is that creates those kind of people. So, how shadow work works. And that is a mouthful to say.
It is.
It is a layering.
It made my brain kind of twist to the left a little bit. I was like, I was reading it out loud earlier to myself. I was like, how does that work?
But it's a layering. This is a multifaceted aspect of who we are that as we go through these experiences and we begin to cultivate these survival mechanisms, we end up building upon it in different ways and different shapes as we go through and figure out how to survive. I mean, we've talked about ego before, and ego's number one goal is survival and connection. And whether that's
to protect us from ourselves, even if
yeah,
it sees us as a threat. It's funny because I was just thinking about this. Everybody's scared about AI, right? Ego is very much like an AI program because everybody's scared of AI only because they think AI eventually is going to get to a point where it has to protect us from us, and that means getting rid of us because we're the most dangerous things to us. The ego works a lot in that way. It's protecting us first from dying of the elements, from tigers and cheetahs, and nowadays it tries to protect us from hurtful words and hurtful
yeah.
situations, and it will even protect us from ourselves. It knows you better than you do sometimes.
Well, again, we've talked about how the unconscious mind, that's 95% of our thoughts. Another great quote by Carl Jung: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And it just speaks to the power of this force. Most of us have gone through life with no acknowledgement of the forces that drive us. Have you ever wanted to make a life change? Have you ever wanted to make a decision you knew was right and you didn't? This is the unconscious mind. This is that safety. And realistically, as we have this conditioning, we talk about authenticity a lot on this podcast, and it's because it's at the heart of the philosophy. It is the goal of existence for each and every person to become authentically themselves. And the more you do this work, the more you remove these layers of conditioning, of domestication, the more you can step into your true authentic self, from your authentic needs to your authentic interests to your authentic self-expression.
Well, it's really crazy because when you think about shadow work and how it works, like all the teachings almost in the same kind of order, really, especially the axioms. There's a lot of axioms that encourage you to be observant and to create awareness, right?
Yeah.
They then encourage you to explore the inner world. I talk about this a lot, deep reflection. This is something we do a lot. The kind of third step the axioms kind of take us through is acceptance.
Yeah.
Accepting our conditions and changing the things we can. And then the axioms and our teachings encourage transformation, integration, harmonizing. And then of course, the master always in search of new things to learn, kind of continuous growth. The fact that our learning and teaching is a continuous cycle for us. So it's kind of cool. It was not done on purpose that way, but perhaps these are universal truths we're talking about. So they all kind of just come together.
No, that's so beautifully said, though. I mean, again, we've talked about how you look at different religions, different types of paths in life, and they all, for the most part, are the same kind of journey, just whether it's phrased different or different ideals. The message is the same. The end destination is the same. And it is self awareness is at the heart of so much of it. The Bible talks about it in metaphor. You look at Buddhism and it talks about it in the form of spiritual growth. You look at Hinduism and the evolution of transcending ourselves.
Right. So we talk about you were talking about how shadow work actually works. Let's run through these steps real quick if you
Yeah,
want.
let's do it.
Let's start with recognizing your shadow, building awareness.
And that is the first step in shadow work is beginning to understand the mechanisms that make it operate. The shadow is known as the shadow for one reason, because it's hidden away. It is the shadow that follows you around that you never think to pay attention to. And when you start doing this work, it is taking a flashlight and shining it in the dark room and finding the dust that's built up under the carpet. It's finding all the things that you never saw before because you never shed light on it.
And as I teach, as I've taught you and taught others, the easiest way to do this is start by noticing the strong reactions we have to people or situations, those things that create emotional triggers or judgments or irritation.
Yeah.
That's a that's a really easy place to start. It's going to suck once you start it, but it's an easy place to start.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
mean, it's like
walking into the shallow end of the pool and slowly making your way to the deep end.
right. I mean, I think back to how much I used to be so triggered by people who got really angry. That's what would kick on my nervous system, which parts of the anger does do that, but the emotions I had towards it, I felt so much resentment towards angry people and people who would be so audacious to get angry when someone transgressed against them. And it's like, it's because that anger I felt, that judgment I felt inside of me was secretly my shadow because of how much I wasn't allowing myself to do the same thing, to feel angry in moments where I needed to. I mean, what is anger? Anger represents one thing in our emotions, and that is a boundary defense. When we have been trespassed upon, when we have been treated poorly, anger comes up because anger is a way for us to protect ourselves. It's a way to stand
Well,
up
it's
for
also
ourselves.
when we don't get the things we need for a long time. Anger compels us to get those things.
Yeah.
And as we talk about a lot on this show, you'll see it in our teachings and in the axioms. Too much of anything is not great. It's not ideal. Too much good stuff is not ideal. Too much bad stuff is not ideal. So anger can have a place in our life as long as we don't just, explode. Like that guy from what's that movie where it's all the emotions and the little red guy? He's always like
Oh,
exploding.
no.
He's always literally exploding. I don't know how the guy hasn't had a stroke by now, but maybe not to that extent. But sometimes we have to go that far because people just aren't listening to us. People just aren't, we're being left out. And it's not even just being left out of things per se, but we're being neglected in some ways. And anger helps us not only reinforce those boundaries, as you said, but it can also compel us to do something that is good for us when no one else is doing anything good for us or giving us the things we need.
And another thing to look at when you have these really strong emotions, especially in certain circumstances where you're really triggered, is there's a good chance that this isn't the first time you felt this emotion in a similar situation. Again, energy needs to flow, and if it doesn't, it bottles up. And when it bottles up, it's like the charge in a battery, and it might turn into acid and not be hidden away from you, but the minute that same energy gets touched on it, all that energy comes alive. And it's important to have the awareness, which we talk about a bunch, where we are triggered and we can understand where is this emotion really coming from. And often you'll find points in your childhood.
Well, like we said before in another episode, human beings are all different. They're all wired different. They all carry possibly preordained personalities and attitudes. And each of them come with unique needs that aren't obvious.
Right. One part of this work is you start to learn your needs. I mean, the reason so many people, there are so many people that are operating from this space, most people don't realize what their needs are. And unfortunately, many people are passive in trying to get their needs met. As you start doing this work, you begin to understand your needs. You can vocalize them. You can begin expressing yourself. And even if you feel like you're too much in an area, you're not, because we all have our deficiencies and the areas we excel in. It's one of the things I've learned being in a healthy relationship is I don't have to be perfect all the time. I can express when I'm having a bad day or that I need a little extra.
Hmm.
And that communication is reciprocal. It goes both ways. And because of that, neither of us ever feel drained or confused or like we have to act passive aggressively to get needs met, which I'll be honest, that was back in my past relationships. I would be very passive about my needs because it'd always be like, you should understand, you should see what I'm doing, you should reciprocate the
You
energy I'm
should
putting
know. You
in.
should
You
read my
should
mind,
know,
read my
yeah.
body language, read my attitude.
And you should know, yeah.
Right. And that's something that I've been married for 24 years now, somewhere in there. I know I get it wrong every time, but it's been a long time. And that's something that I have dealt with a lot in our relationship is encouraging the this cessation of passive aggressiveness. You don't ever have to be passive aggressive with me. Just tell me. Tell me so I know. Because although she looks at me as this very intelligent person and I know everything and I feel everything and I am all this, I don't. I miss the mark sometimes when I look at somebody, and I'm very empathic, but doesn't mean that I'm all knowing. So, cut out the passive aggressive stuff. Just tell me what's up.
And don't
Many
bottle it
times,
up.
most times I can kind of get the idea that someone's upset with me, but it's better if they just tell me, especially if they know they can be safe with me.
I'd even say that's one of the biggest crux in so many relationships that go bad is there was just so many unspoken expectations. There
Yes.
was so much be a mind reader, figure me out. You've been with me for 20 years. You should know how I operate. You should know what I need. And it's
Right.
like we're constantly changing. You
Well,
can't expect
and
anyone,
yeah, but the person may not even know what they need all the time. So
you know,
they're not going to know. If they don't know, if you've gone a few minutes where it's all this back and forth, just pause and say, "Okay, look, I don't get it. So can you just tell me?"
yeah. And this ties into another important aspect of starting the shadow work. Look at your relationships. Look at the patterns, especially in your dysfunctional relationships. If you have the same type of ending in all your relationships and you just tell yourself that just another bad guy or another bad girl,
Right.
there's a good chance that you can do some shadow work there and realize the part you played in your own suffering there.
Well,
For me, it's
something I say a lot in my life is there's always a common denominator. You sure that's not you? Because it
you
really
know,
could be.
when
It
more
really
often than not it is. We just
it is.
our psyches don't like us to be the bad guy, and that's what makes this work so difficult, especially when you start is because you're not a bad guy. It does not mean you're a bad person. You are a human being, which means that you are not perfect, but it's hard for
You
us to
just lack
not try to be
awareness.
perfect. Yeah.
You just lack awareness. And we all lack awareness at times. But the more you make the conscious effort, it's something that he said, and it's in that quote of yours. It's you have to make the unconscious stuff conscious. You really do. That's kind of the point of awareness. We're not just saying be aware of buses when you're crossing the street. You have to be aware of these triggers, these emotional outbursts, these judgments that just come from nowhere. And the reason we react the way we do when we're not aware of what's going on inside is because these things hit us like a train too, because we're
Yep.
not consciously aware of them. So
Well, it's like one thing I'll say is as you start doing this work, as you get a little further in, like I said, it gets worse before it gets better, but as you start getting to that better end of things, you become grateful for your triggers because whenever you're triggered, you realize, hey, there's work I need to do. This is showing me something about myself that I'm not aware of.
And something he was very fond of was problems aren't problems, they're opportunities and possibilities. So every time one comes up, then you get the opportunity to work on that little by little by little. And it will make a huge impact in your life. It really will. This goes back to the axiom, where we're not sweating the small stuff, where we're kind of taking the small stuff and becoming aware of it so that when the bigger things happen, so we're not hit out of nowhere by like this emotional train or whatever it is happening to us.
Mhm.
I have some reflection questions before we move on to the next step of this. You can reflect on the awareness part of it. Oftentimes, like I said, I'll teach people you got to start becoming a little bit aware more and more of your triggers and judgments and irritations and stuff. Some ways to reflect on this and to help you with this is the first one is, why does this person or situation bother me so badly, so intensely? The second one is, do I carry traits similar to those I criticize or become triggered by or judging? We talk about being a mirror to each other all the time. That's kind of what that second one is really kind of making you do, is when you're looking at someone and these triggers and stuff come up, are they a mirror to you? Do you carry the same traits that you see in them that irritate you, annoy you, trigger you?
Yeah. And if you don't, why don't you have those traits? It's like looking at relationships. I mean, often when you get in a serious relationship, when it starts turning into a long-term relationship, you will be triggered in a good relationship. Do not get that confused. A good relationship is not bliss. Be thankful when that happens, because if you have a good partner, you can work through it. I can't tell you how many times me and my girl, we trigger each other, but we're able to just sit there. And it's like she has a lot of issues with where she felt like she wasn't enough in a relationship, or she felt like she was too much in a relationship, and I felt
Hmm.
like I wasn't enough. And when we
Hmm.
get into those spaces, we can talk about it, and it's like, all right, where are you feeling this? What security can I give you around this? How can I hold you through this while you work through it? Because instead of us trying to fix one another, we hold each other's hand while we work on ourselves. And it's such a beautiful dichotomy, because that's what allows us to grow so much within our relationship. So just keep that in mind as you're in relationships. Just because someone triggers you or upsets you doesn't mean it's a bad relationship. It means that there are plenty of areas to grow, and you can grow together because you're partners.
Right.
Though often, as we talked about, how you feel like you're living the same relationship through different people all the time. Often look at your core wounds, which is another thing we'll do an episode on down the road. We all have core wounds, and so often our attachment systems are geared to be highly attracted to people who have the capacity to hit those wounds. And when they do, our brain gets hormone signals and hijacks our mind, and it makes us this creates these attachments because our soul is yearning to fix the problem it couldn't before. I know for me, I was attracted to many relationships where I kept trying to be the fixer, and it was
Hmm.
resembling the relationship I had with my father, where I wanted his approval and he struggled with addiction. And so I was replaying that relationship in all my relationships. And it was never my job. You don't want a relationship where you're trying to look for the most broken partner. Not that's what I did, but you look for broken people, because if you can fix them, you can redeem yourself, which was hidden in my shadow. It's not like that was on my Tinder profile for what I was looking for. Please be certain, please be broken to an extent where I can save you. Like, but it
Please
was
be
what I was
drowning in
attracted
trauma.
to.
I like to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably should keep that off your Tinder profile. Probably get a good thing.
Yeah, to say the least.
So the next part of this is exploring the shadow, this deep reflection, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. How would one start on that part?
Journaling. That's a good place to start. It's why I make everybody journal. I don't know if you guys actually journal as much as I encourage you to or command you to, because I don't ever really want to see your journals unless you have something you want to show me. Because remember, as you know, I encourage journaling. I kind of make it mandatory, but I never look at it. I never want to see it because that's for you. But journaling is a very good way to start that deep reflection.
Yes.
It's a very powerful way to perform a self inquiry, to take that internal inventory of what's going on. But the key is you have to be honest with yourself. And this is why, again, we say if you're working with somebody, then you need to work with them and just ask them if our advice is something that will help you, because you have to be honest, because you're going to be documenting your thoughts, your reactions, dreams, triggers that you've noticed, behaviors. But what journals really help us do, Michael, they help us bring to the surface these reoccurring patterns that we don't even realize we're
Yes.
stuck in.
That was exactly what I was going to touch on with what you're saying. As you start to, especially when you journal about your triggers, as you start to, when you have these emotional flare ups and you begin writing it down, as you begin to fill this out more and more and you look between the times you were feeling that, you will start to pick up on certain verbiage. You'll pick up on certain trends within your mood and your observations of what you were upset about. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
begin to find trends that are the hidden component you are looking for. But like Justin said, self honesty is the most important part. And one thing I want to touch on, especially when you are working with someone,
It's really the
there's
hardest
so
part too.
it is. And so one of the reasons you hear so many people say therapy doesn't work for me. One of the reasons therapy is so difficult for people is because you have to build trust with a therapist. And when you're building that trust, so many people treat their therapist like they do their family and their friends, where they're trying to present this facade and not be vulnerable. And it's like, if you can't be vulnerable and express your weakness, express your struggles, they can't help you. They're not going to read your mind any better than your spouses.
Right.
And so that self honesty is so important, especially when working with a professional, because that's how you start getting into the roots. My therapist, we have a great relationship because I have been fully vulnerable about my struggles, my weaknesses, and the different things I go through. And now, whenever we have a session, I have something going on, she can be like, hey, are you sure you're not feeling this from this period in your life? Are you sure you're not having this past stuff come up that's affecting you? Are you sure you're not making excuses for yourself or putting your own crap on other people? And it's like, you know what? You got me. You got me. Thank you. I appreciate you calling me out on my crap. Because that's the other important part with these relationships. When we have a fully filled up shadow, when our ego is what controls our narrative, we do not handle criticism well because it's perceived as an attack and not someone who loves us trying to be honest and vulnerable with you, saying, hey, I've noticed this in you and I'm concerned about you.
Yeah. Yeah. We lie to our therapists, which is easy because we lie to ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the greatest lie ever told. It's the one we tell ourselves.
Yeah. I can't tell you how often I've started saying that since we started podcasting because it just echoes in my mind.
It's a good one because it's true. It's like, I learned that from my friend and brother David Edge, when he and I did the KOA, started the KOA many moons ago. And that's something he would say. He was very, I wish I could have him in on this show with us, to be honest with you, because he was like a very good to go to. He was like a tome on shadow work. He just seemed to be naturally really good at it. So, and
Do you
he,
think you could get him on? Maybe we should do a part two.
yeah, we could. He might be hard to find because he is a over the road trucker. He's on the road a lot. It's hard to nail him down these days. But back to this step. This is why I do a lot of reflection exercises on this show. And we could do meditations for everything. We could do this and that. But as you guys have probably noticed by now, I prefer to do reflection meditations, reflection exercises, because writing in a journal could be a very meditative, but it's also just as potentially dangerous, especially when you're starting to work through traumas and stuff like that. So, but like for example, I have two for this one. What parts of myself do I dislike, reject, or hide? You're basically going right at yourself saying, hey, what's up, bro? You right?
Yeah. And your ego don't like that.
No, I still don't like it sometimes, especially when I'm being a little a-hole to everybody. I wake up in a bad mood or I've got something that bothered me deeply and really, but and I'm not bragging, but I've been doing this stuff for a really long time. So it's very difficult to cut me in a way that I have to like treat the wound, but it does still happen and it catches me off guard. So then I have to go into my shadow work and say, hey, what's up, bro? What's your problem? Right? I'm a little more honest about it these days because if I got to fight myself, then we'll fight for a minute and then we'll sit down and talk and have beers and whatever.
Yep. Well, and this ties into another important part of all this work we talk about throughout this podcast. When you have these emotions come up, one of the things we're prone to do is shoving it down. You gotta feel it. We gotta feel all these emotions. You gotta feel it to heal it is a big buzz term you hear out there, but it's so true. Because again, when that energy hits that stored energy and it comes to the surface, if you try shoving it back down, you're just gonna be that much more charged when you're presented with the same problem. You got to learn how to start embracing that feeling, not judging it, not being critical of it, but allowing it to exist. Maybe not acting on it when you're feeling this plethora of a volcano worth of anger, but allowing that anger to exist within you and being okay with it, learning to be okay with it. I heard this term a long time ago. I suffered with substance abuse problems for a long time, and I went to rehab. And there was this man who was teaching there, and he was one of the most enlightened people I'd ever met. And I'll never forget one of the lectures he gave. It's like, addiction is simply the mismanagement of emotions. And it's because so many people do not have that emotional intelligence. Yeah, you might be able to, like, hey, that's anger. But do you know how to sit with your anger? Do you know how to embrace your anger? Do you know how to love your anger? Because that's what this work allows you to do. It allows you to take these parts you stored away because you deemed them bad or unworthy and learn to give them a place within your heart and soul so that they can help make you whole. I mean, the emotional guidance scale is such a big part of our lives. All of our emotions serve beneficial purposes. And again, it's a compass. But when you remove parts of that compass, you're going to get really lost when you start pointing in a direction that you don't know what it is.
Yeah. You're
But
right.
look at the areas where you get the most upset. Look at where you project your own shortcomings on people who do not have them. Again, like I was talking about earlier with the anger and standing up for yourself, even when it's people who are doing it from an overbearing place. The reason it's so upsetting is because of how much secretly your soul wants to learn how to do that. So embrace those emotions when they come up. Learn to talk with yourself through it. What is really going on within me? What am I feeling right now? Why does this upset me so much? Is this something that I am capable of doing myself, and why not if I can?
The answer is probably because once upon a time you expressed yourself and everybody was like, shut up.
Yeah,
That's
it's a very
probably why.
gentle way to phrase it, but yeah, 100%.
Well, remember what I said. When you're having these triggers, when you're having these disputes, when you're in conflict, you will fall back to your lowest level of healing. So that's why this stuff is important. Little by little, build up your tolerance for the little things. Build up tolerance for your triggers. Build up tolerance for other people's quirks and things that annoy you. And little by
Yeah.
little, your growth and healing. So I often like to say growth and healing kind of go to hand in hand and together. And look, it's my opinion, and I don't share very many opinions, but it's been my experience. A lot of people who have trouble growing is because they haven't healed from other things. So as you grow, as you heal, you will fall back to that new level every time. Does that make sense
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's one of the things that kind of hit me within this journey. I know you've said this quite a bit, and more it resonates. I mean, it's like in life, as I've gotten older, I've wanted to accomplish new things, and I keep having setbacks and falling to my default patterns because we never rise to the level of success we want. We fall to the level of our patterns with those pressures from the goals we are seeking to achieve, which is why so many people want to be entrepreneurs. And you hear most successful entrepreneurs took them 4 or 5 times. It's because they had to raise the level of their training. They had to make their baseline stronger than what it was, because we will never rise to the level of our expectations. No
Right.
dream will ever be actualized in its fullest sense of what we imagine.
Not
But
until
it will
we
be,
rise up to the challenge. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You know, and this kind of ties into, I mean, so many of us, as we've talked before in this podcast, so many people look at fulfilling themselves from the outside. And one of my favorite Young quotes is, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks
Yes.
inside awakes.
Yes. I have a book that I've had for, God, almost 20 years. And it's a little gold book. And this thing is messed up. Like it looks like it's been through it, okay? Because I carried the thing everywhere with me. And it's a little book of Taoist quotes, but it also has quotes from people like Carl Jung. And that's one that quote is in there. That's one of my go-tos. Like the page is bent. For you book people out there, don't kill me. I know you're not supposed to do that, but you know what? It's mine. I can do whatever I want with it. But I love that book. I used to carry it around with me, either in my book bag or but I've had it a long time. And he has a lot of quotes in there, which of course propelled me to start learning about him. and he's one of my favorite philosophers. It's almost like there's a big jump between the great philosophers, which seem like they're so far away, right? Because it's like thousands of years ago. And
Yeah.
but we have these modern day ones, like who we're talking about today and others. So I love that quote. I just wanted to kind of fanboy over that quote. And he's got a lot of good ones in there too.
Yeah, we're probably going to have quite a few more quotes we bring up within this episode because it's just his words are so impactful and so full of truth. And kind of like the axioms, the more you go on the journey, the more depth you feel when you read or hear them.
I definitely look at those quotes much different these days, for sure. They have new meaning for me because I have grown beyond my initial understanding of them. And many of them, I had no idea what the hell they were talking about.
Yo.
So, yeah, there is a progression through all of these things, all of these nuggets of wisdom. And that's really what the axioms are meant to be, little nuggets of wisdom. So the next step in this would be to accept our shadow, which is part of who we are, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one other thing I want to touch on here with the shadow and beginning to understand it and being able to find the roots of our shadow, and this is one of your favorite topics here, the limiting beliefs within us, because most of these changes that happen within us when we shove these parts of the shadow down are moments where we made agreements or we made a limiting belief about the things we went through and how to handle them. Again, the agreement, the belief I had is it's not okay to express anger. If I express anger, bad things will happen or I won't have my needs met. And it's
Right.
not like I ever thought about that. That wasn't like how I consciously went through the world. But that's what limiting beliefs are. They're things hidden in our unconscious mind. These wires that are crossed in our mind that this is law on how to behave. This is law on how I need to show up in the world. This is the law for me to feel safe. And when we can find these limiting beliefs, we can start rewiring our mind and begin opening ourselves up to new methods to having our needs met or to show up in the world, which is more aligned with our authentic self and our authentic feelings instead of trying to cover, repress, or manipulate the world so that so we can get our needs met.
Well, and that's the whole point of this, so that we could become authentic. And the more authentic we become, the freer we are. Holistically across the board.
So I just had to throw that out there. Okay, so what was
No,
what was the next step?
acceptance. It's
Yeah.
another big topic we talk about a lot around here. Because this is like a radical self honesty journey. It's a whole thing because it involves courageously accepting the traits you might have labeled as negative, or more likely, everyone else labeled them as negative. So you label them as negative. Things
Yeah.
like jealousy, fear, anger. And I'll throw a caveat in there because a lot of times throughout these episodes, we talk about things that we prefer not to. And the axioms kind of move us away from things like jealousy, fear, anger, selfishness, things like that. Again, not everything is all good and all bad. We must find harmony because these things, I get jealous, I have fear, sometimes I get angry, and sometimes I just don't want to help anybody. I just want to be selfish. So,
And that's okay.
it's okay because these are and accept these things without judgment or shame. The judgment and shame we learn. We're taught that.
Yeah.
But these things are also a part of us, a part of our being holistically. So we have to accept with love and compassion all parts of ourselves. That doesn't mean we let any one part of ourselves rule over us. We must find balance and peace. And that's why shadow work is so hard because it's the acceptance of things that you've been taught and that you believe are really bad.
Yeah. Well, I think one important thing to look at, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is kind of my understanding. If you're someone who has a low tolerance to the world around you, if you're someone who gets upset easily, if you have a lot of angry outbursts and you tend to be pretty negative towards others, there's a good chance it's because of how negative you're being towards yourself. That level of self-acceptance you're not allowing yourself to have is trickling out into the real world, into the world around you, and that you don't accept anything around you because of how little you accept yourself. You see this so much with people who are so bitter to the world, and the little things will ruin their week. But
That's
it's because
exactly
of
what I teach. You got it right. That's how I see it, and that's how I teach it. Because what is inside comes out into the world. So that's why
Me,
it's so important to do that self improvement, the self work.
one thing we'll be touching on in a later episode is the Hermetic principles, which is, in my opinion, the laws of the universe. And the quote is, one of those laws is, as above, so below. And it is that your inner world will be directly reflected in your outer world. The
Yes.
situations, if you're someone with bad luck, there's a good chance it's because you have an internalized belief of you are unlucky, and most likely you feel unworthy of having a good life.
Well,
As
yeah,
above, so below.
you're right. You've never perceived that you've received favor from anyone around you, so you give no favor, not even to yourself. You're very suspicious all the time.
Yeah.
And those kind of people we're talking about that you were just talking about a minute ago, those people are just simply very disharmonious. They're
Yeah.
in constant fighting, going back to the dance between the ego and the spirit. There is no balance there. There's no harmony because they have taken sides one over the other and they are in a constant fight. And
Yeah.
there could be a lot of trauma and stuff there too.
Usually there is.
Well, yeah, and because we all have this, we all have traumas, we all have things that aren't going well for us at times. And, that's why it's important to not only really dive into the good, but also, and even see, even right now, I'm using labels, but understand that's how our language works, and our language sucks sometimes, but
Well, unfortunately, a lot of this work is paradoxical.
it is.
But I mean, there's another Young quote that ties into this. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become. And
This
it's
goes back
just,
to that. It wasn't an argument really, but the TikTok comments. Remember we talked about that a couple shows ago, where the guy was like, "Nah, it's only the external that creates the internal," and I just
oh
can't.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just I'm sorry, you're wrong. That's just where it is, and maybe there's some shadow work to be done there. But we all have things that we have to work on.
And realistically, you're not gonna crap. I've dedicated the last 2 years so fervently to this journey, and that's only a couple years. But it's like I'm realizing the more I learn, the less I know. And realistically, this path is not one that you're gonna just one day get to the end of it. Other than when you die. I mean, this is a lifelong journey.
Well, and then you're
But
probably going to pick it up on the next one. I mean, it just doesn't
yeah,
stop. It just doesn't really stop. But kind of getting back to this acceptance, it's really, really important that you practice self love and self compassion, self empathy, all these things. You need to provide yourself a space for potential, not the
yeah,
void, not the big scary black hole, the void.
yeah.
Everything is potential. Every piece
One
of energy in this universe that has not been dedicated to something is simply potential. That includes the dark energy, the light energy, all this stuff is potential until you act upon it. So, self compassion, self love, because again, everyone has a shadow. It's human, it's normal, but it's so valuable to acknowledge these parts of yourself so that you can harmonize.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, I mean, we talk about it every episode almost, but self love is the most important ingredient as you start this journey because even as you start seeing these shadow parts of you and these restrictions you've placed upon yourself, none of this is bad. These are all things that you did to survive. At some point in time in your life, you took this belief on because it's what you needed to do to feel safe. And you should never judge yourself for these things. You should love these parts of yourself as you try to reintegrate them because at one point they were exactly what you needed.
Well,
Self compassion, it is vital.
it's difficult for a human being to observe something and not judge it. But I will say, judge it once if you have to, and then let it go. Don't sit there and judge yourself over and over and over again. Show yourself mercy. Talked about mercy and justice, which kind of goes into judging. So these agreements that we talked about in recent shows, those are for you too. Those aren't just for the outside world. You have to practice those for yourself too. Because if you can't, then you can't move into the next phase of this, which would be integration. You'll get stuck in that judgment phase. You'll get stuck in that self-loathing if you're not careful.
Yeah. And one thing I want to bring up, I wasn't sure when would be a good time to bring this up, but you see a lot of people in the healing journey who are in really dark places and who are stuck. And the key to the journey is it's 20% awareness and it's 80% work, because you can shine the light on all these things. And if you learn all these things about yourself and you don't do anything with that information, it can lead to some really dark places, because then you've uncovered all the skeletons in your closet and they're staying in your closet. So once you start to learn these things, it's about putting in the work, which we're getting into integration next, but it's a vital part of this. It's a complete process, because if you get stuck at a spot, which it's okay to get stuck, but you got to keep trying to do the work and not just give up on it, because once you see the things, you can't unsee them.
You can't.
Or it takes a lot of work.
You can't. No, you just can't. It will always be there. You can't. I haven't been able to. Not that I've ever tried, because I seek truth. And
Yeah.
truth is sometimes ugly. But like the shadow, not all truth is bad. It contains many good things too.
I would even argue that almost all truth is good, because through truth can we truly find acceptance and understanding. I mean, again, when we first started training, that was what I craved the most. I just wanted truth. I wanted to understand myself, and I wanted to stop sabotaging my life.
Yeah.
So integration, where do we start with this?
Well, where I start with my students is, now that we've gotten to this part, we have to now start showing our shadow some compassion and some love. Because really, once you've gotten to this point, you are now actually reclaiming your hidden potential. And you really need to look for those positive qualities hidden in the shadow that have been hidden for so long. Things again like creativity, assertiveness, strength, courage. And now you get to the point where you're intentionally integrating them into your being.
Yeah. I mean, one of the buzz terms out there you hear is inner child work. Well, you
Right.
can't do inner child work without shadow work. And you start to realize, and I love this analogy. The reason I like inner child work so much is because that inner child within you is virtually your shadow. It is all these repressed parts and emotions and feelings and experiences you weren't allowed to live. And so much of trauma that we go through is stored within us, and it conditions us because we weren't allowed to feel what we were feeling in that moment, whether that was anger or grief or sadness. It's these parts that this inner part of you, as you start to treat the shadow with love, begins to surface. And you're going to feel tons of sadness when you start knowing it's okay to feel sadness. That battery's going to start realizing, hey, I can start getting rid of some of this. This isn't shameful anymore. So feel that sadness. I'll be honest, when I started my shadow work, which I was going through a lot of trauma at the time, but I had such profound sadness and even depression I went through. For the first year, it was almost nonstop. And luckily, I had you as a teacher, and I was doing the work and reading up and constantly giving myself the affirmations of, it's okay to feel this. Just let it happen. Let it come up, let it process, and let it leave. Don't judge it. Don't condemn it. Just allow these emotions to come up. But the more I did that, the more confidence I gained, the more I was able to integrate these parts of the shadow, because I almost wonder the buildup of these emotions is what allows the shadow to stay so stuck.
Well, and this brings us to a part that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. This is why, and we say this a lot, surround yourself with people who give you space to roam, to explore, a place that is a place where you discover your potential and it's safe and they're not going to judge you and stuff. I provided you a wide open field to explore this, but I was always watching your back, type of thing.
Yeah. Now, there was never a time I couldn't reach out to, and I'm so thankful for that, because the people who I was closest to, like, luckily my mother understood to a degree, and she was someone in my corner as well. But I had close friends who were just like, what are you doing? Like, let's go party. Let's go live it up. I get you're depressed. And I think it was more they felt the discomfort of my uncomfortable emotions, so they were trying to fix it to feel better, which I think is part of what is this merry-go-round of emotions. Is often the discomfort we feel when we're trying to help people is because we feel discomfort from their discomfort. But yeah, a lot of my social group that I had, that what I was close with at the time, was not game for what I was doing. They didn't understand it. They didn't want to understand it. And they wanted to go bring me back to the same things that I used to cope with before. And more I started to distance myself and be around people who were on the same journey, because that's where I found fulfillment. That's where I found true expression of myself and being a place to be vulnerable, which is with you. I had a really close friend who I was able to do that with, and my mother to a degree. And thankfully, due to these people in my life, I was able to foster this and work through this. There was no judgment, there was no shame for feeling sad all the time or feeling depressed, because I was there constantly. And I get how that looks from the outside, from anyone who knew me prior or anyone who is very averse to looking into shadow work or self awareness, because who wants to be sad all the time? I remember at one point I confronted a really close friend of mine because they were just like, this isn't working for you. You're depressed all the time. And it's like, no. Right now, I am grieving so much of my life that I haven't gotten to feel before. I'm grieving so many missed years of lacking self expression and stepping fully into myself. I am grieving who I was because I can never go back to who that was. And these virtually were just ways I could try to find to express the emotions that were coming to the surface. But to your question, I mean, it's if you're starting this journey and people don't understand what you're going through, find new people, go into circles where they're, because you'll find them all over the internet, all these different healing groups, and some of them are more just meme groups and people looking to express all their pent up aggression, but you can find good circles. We found a group called Soul Luna in the Springs who has just been imperative for our journey because we can go, we can be vulnerable. These are people who are fighting the same battles and we can share wisdom and learn from each other. And it's beautiful, but it's about aligning yourself with people who are on the same journey as you.
Yeah, right, exactly. And there's an axiom for this that talks about people will start to misunderstand you as you grow and change, as you integrate these things, because you're really going to have some behavioral changes. Percent. There's going to be something, at least one thing, probably more, that comes out and it's going to change the way you behave. It may change the way you speak. It may change the way you see the world. I just want people to understand that this is natural. Some people will see trepidation sometimes in you. Just do your thing, move along, be authentic, and because there are going to be changes. This is a transformative thing at this stage. As you integrate, you are going to be a new person in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
you need to try to remember as you integrate, as you try to express, take actions to express these shadow traits positively and constructively, like we are right now. This is an act of expression that we are talking about how this work is hard, it's scary, you will cry, all these things will happen to you.
You will fall apart before you come back together. But you'll come
Right,
back together more whole than you ever have before.
exactly. So it's really important at this stage to try and express these things positively and constructively, especially when you have to explain them to people. They'll say, "Man, you've changed," or they'll say, "Oh my God, you've changed." Both are okay. You just gotta
And
learn to
often,
deal
one of the
with it.
biggest things I realize with people who dislike the changes, you will trigger their shadows.
Yes.
People will be very triggered by the work you're doing. Another quote by Carl Jung is, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And I ran into that. I was triggering a lot of people in my life.
Yeah. I'll defer to him on this one. Yeah, he's the expert. He's right.
Yeah.
But we also, during this process, another thing to remember is that you are starting to transform the shadow holistically and turning them into strengths. All these things that you've discovered are strengths instead of just these unconscious, invisible influences.
Like boundaries. I tell you what, I didn't even know what boundaries were before this journey. And
Mhm.
now I've gotten very effective as like if you aren't good for me, you will show me the place you have in my life. And I will make sure I uphold that because my peace is more important than trying to explain myself.
And we talk about boundaries a lot because they are super important, and not many of us were really taught those
It's a vital
growing up.
part of our authenticity.
It is
We must be
because,
able to stand up for ourselves.
like me or not, here I am.
Yeah.
So, yeah, get over it.
You know, there was that book, I've referenced it a lot, and I highly recommend it for anyone, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, who is one of my favorite modern-day philosophers. And he talks about when you start on this journey, He references this girl who starts realizing that she's being taken advantage of by her family and by all these people in her life. And as she starts making these changes, she starts standing up for herself. And her family's like, there's something seriously wrong with you. And they try to get her into the doctor and get her on medication to try to make her go back to who she was, because they didn't like the changes because they weren't getting what they used to out of her.
Yeah.
And you will face that often in this. You will lose a lot of friends on this journey. And it's not a bad thing, because true friends will support your growth and to support the
They'll stick
changes
with you.
within you. Yeah.
That's why we have to be firm but graceful with the people in our life.
Yeah. And realistically, again, as you learn to accept yourself more, you begin to accept others more for their flaws. And it's not that you push these people out of life because you're just done with it. You develop strong empathy for them. You just also understand it's not your job to show them this path. People have to find and want to find this path on their own. Yeah.
So does this just stop? Is it like one and done? Man, I finally got through my shadow work. Oh, hallelujah. Does it just stop there?
The one thing I've learned with shadow work is as you begin to uncover these layers and start working through understanding them and why they do what they do, and you start working through them, you realize that there is shadows built upon shadows, and it's like they all coalesce at a deeper level. And now there is always more to learn about yourself. And even as you grow, you will have other things go into your shadow as you start this journey. We've talked about the spiritual ego, which is very rampant out there nowadays. And that's not something that they started this journey with, but it's something they developed often to cope with the difficulty of the shadow work.
Well, they really hate hearing that too.
Yeah. Because that's the one thing that keeps them feeling validated. Because the point of this work, that authenticity, is you learn to validate yourself, that you don't need other people to give you those attaboys. Your attaboy you give yourself is the most important one. And sort of with that work, it doesn't mean you'll never not want acceptance and appreciation from others. I don't think that's possible. But you will learn to not crave that more than you crave that from yourself, which is authenticity. Because when you're authentic and you're showing up for yourself, your opinion of yourself is far more important than anyone else's.
Well, and I just want to point out, and for those of you who were offended by what Michael said, because he did call us ogres. He said we're like onions. We have lots of layers. And
I can't tell you how often I think about that movie as I've done this. There's another great spiritual teacher out there named Michael Singer, and he talks about when we try to discover authenticity, it's all about peeling away the layers of our preferences. The more we try to define our preferences, the more we pigeonhole ourselves into this is me. But when you remove preferences, when you remove specifics, and you just enjoy the bliss that is life, you enjoy what you enjoy and you don't enjoy what you don't enjoy. It's like the best example of this is, I don't like country music. And you tell yourself that, and so you never listen to country music. The minute you hear a banjo, you're like, turn that off. And you're missing out on like a whole bunch of music. You might find a couple songs you enjoy.
You're actually missing out on a whole culture.
Yeah.
With food, and it's a whole thing. Everything's a whole thing. Everything's an onion.
So look at your preferences, because there might be some of the areas where your ego or your shadow is holding on to a specific aspect of who you believe you are, these unlimiting beliefs you have within.
Yeah. But preferences aren't bad. We're human. We have preferences. Just don't be so attached to them that they are like your life path.
Yeah.
You have to explore to grow. But as we talk about this continuous growth, this never-ending process, I've noticed for me, I have less shadow work, quote unquote shadow work. It's more of like these dark night of the souls that come upon me, these new things that come in, and I'm like, oh, you almost got past me. Let's talk to you about this. And it can be depressive sometimes. It could be really sad, and things, you start getting confusion, you start having doubt. And on this path, there's plenty of that for 1,000 different reasons. But this isn't a one-time thing. It's a never-ending process of the practice of awareness, the practice of acceptance, and continuous integration throughout your life. And as I like to say, probably beyond that too.
Yeah, I fully believe that. You know, it's like as you begin doing this work, if you're someone who struggles to accomplish your goals, or you have these dreams you want to do and you never seem to follow through on them. I mean, self-sabotage is rampant in the world, and a lot of the self-sabotage is because of these parts, because of this shadow. And so the more we can begin to love and accept ourselves, the more we can begin to trust ourselves, which this work does. I mean, you ask someone to go to the gym with you and they show up 4 days out of the 5 you're supposed to go. Are you going to want to go to the gym with that guy? It's about consistency and taking those little steps. We talk about the work of integration. Start small. Because again, awareness is 20% of the work. Find little areas where you can, for instance, for me, I struggled with conflict. I still do to a degree. But I look for opportunities where conflict is there, smaller opportunities in the beginning, and I try to put myself in those situations. Again, smaller conflict and not something that's going to destroy you that much more. But you
Things you
start
can
to learn
manage.
to
Yeah, just
work
like
with
with
it.
fear. Do little things that you can manage, that you can
Yeah.
control. Yeah.
And that's how you start reintegrating the shadow. You start to cultivate the acceptance of these parts. You begin to trust yourself to feel these emotions, and in turn, you trust the emotions.
Well, because they're part of you, like it or not.
Yeah, and even if you've never felt that emotion before, there's a good chance it's that much more in your shadow. It took me forever to accept that I did have anger. And in fact, it turned out the way my body handled anger because I felt so averse to it is it would then become anxiety within me because that was the only way I could feel it and then express myself in ways that could handle the situations I was in. And it never led to anything good because I wasn't being authentic to the emotion. It wasn't until recently I even learned how to feel anger and to embrace it. And that's a year and a half of shadow work before I got there. But now it's like when it comes online, it's like, what are you trying to tell me? What is important here that I need to pay attention to? And how do I need to proceed? Because I know my anger is a good thing. And it took a long time for that anger to trust me with its wisdom.
As long as it's harmonized, it can be a good thing.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't take over and let you smack your partner or something, then it's a good thing if you're not doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there is definitely a fine line of healthy anger and bad anger. A great way to look at this, I heard this in a quote, and it's like, it's okay to feel sadness, but what you do with that sadness is your responsibility. It's okay to feel angry, but what you do with that anger is your responsibility. And that's true for all our emotions. It is okay to feel them, but what we do with them is our responsibility.
And that's true for every thought. That's true for every action. That's true for every intent.
Yeah.
Ripples are created every time we do something. So I know you brought in some exercises for this.
I have a couple journaling prompts for our journalers out there, and if you do not want to journal, at least spend time as often as you can reflecting on these things.
I guess so. Journaling's better, but go ahead.
I agree, journaling is better, but for those who lack that initiative, you will get there one day.
I tell them that I love them too. It's okay.
So I have 4 questions to ask yourself. What is a reoccurring theme in my struggles? Number 2, what do I judge most harshly in others and why? Number 3, what emotions do I suppress the most? What emotions feel the most unsafe to feel? And lastly, what childhood experiences might have shaped my biggest fears? Now, this is one of those things where you're going to come back to these questions and it's going to change a little more the deeper you get in it because, like I said before, you start to find the layers of your shadow, but as you start diving into those are just layers of a deeper layer, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. But the more awareness you cultivate, the more you dive into understanding yourself and you show yourself love and compassion while you do it, the more your spirit's going to open up to you and the more you're going to see yourself for who you truly are and not the story you've been telling yourself.
Well, I brought some exercises, if that's okay, to share them today.
I knew you would.
You didn't, yeah, I'll never let you down, man. I've always got, and again, all of my exercises are mostly reflection type exercises because that's, especially with shadow work, is really important. It's a reflection.
I was going to say, I know you're as passionate about this topic as I am, so I had no doubt you would have some stuff to bring to the table.
So, the first one, many of you may be familiar with, the mirror exercise. Stand in front of a mirror. Look yourself in the eyes, and you can do this through visualization too, if you don't have access to a mirror. But you need to stand in front of yourself, look yourself in the eyes, and verbally acknowledge aspects of yourself you usually suppress or deny. And then each time you do this, affirm your willingness to accept them. And this kind of works with this other one. As you do this work, start identifying your projections, because we all project. Some of us project more positively than others, but that's because those people have had more practice. Next time you feel a strong judgment or criticism towards yourself or someone else, pause and ask yourself honestly, what does this reflect about myself? And here's one more bonus one. And this is like step 2. Dialogue with your shadow. Find a quiet moment. Imagine meeting your shadow self. Have a compassionate dialogue and ask your shadow self things like, what do you need from me? Or how have you been trying to protect me? And you can come up with your own questions too in dialogue. What do you just think about the things you want to know from your shadow, how you can help it, and ask it how it's helping to help you.
Those are some good exercises.
So before you wrap this up, I'll give you my kind of conclusion to this episode for today. We need to be embracing our shadow for wholeness, for holistic healing and living can come from this. Your shadow is not something to fear. It really offers a profound opportunity waiting for you to take it. Carl Jung reminds us of that true transformation begins by courageously illuminating the darkness within ourselves, by seeking to harmonize with it, not destroy it, not throw it in the trash, but to harmonize with it. When you acknowledge, accept, and integrate your shadow, you become whole, authentic, and more empowered. The path to true strength lies in not in denying your imperfections, but in embracing them, accepting them. Your shadow holds untapped wisdom, creativity, and resilience, qualities that I believe are essential for living an authentic, compassionate, holistic, and meaningful life. So face your shadow, reclaim your hidden power, and step confidently toward a life of clarity and self understanding. This journey inward will be challenging, but the reward, becoming fully and beautifully yourself, is beyond measure. And I'll leave you with the quote that I began this episode with. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. So I appreciate you guys being here with us. Michael?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a wonderful journey, and I hope that this sheds some light on how to proceed in yours. With love, Ad Lucium.
With love and gratitude, Ad Lucium.